So everybody, today I am very pleased to be joined by none other than the chair of the Bitcoin Foundation, former child actor, US presidential candidate, and co-founder of Block.one, now B1, and I believe a former shareholder as well. The new chief of Helios VC, philanthropist, and EOS OG, my friend Brock Pierce. I'd like to welcome you to Bywire Interviews. How are you today, Brock?
I'm grateful. Another day to serve.
Well, you're looking steely-eyed and determined as ever, Brock. So let's jump straight into some questions. So Brock, what do you think, or why do you think there's been a disconnect between Block.one, Dan Larimer, yourself, and the wider EOS community? And what went wrong there, and who's to blame?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's what went right. You know, we're trying to build distributed or decentralized systems. Ultimately, we don't want Block.one being the sole authority. And unfortunately, because of the success, the massive success that Block.one had through the original token sale, it concentrated authority and influence to a degree that most of the network didn't want to do anything without permission from Block.one, which is not how you ultimately build these systems. And so what has me most excited about the prospects of EOS and why I'm jumping back and all in with call it a 7-year sort of commitment, which in the world of crypto is effectively an eternity, is because Dan Larimer isn't at Block.one. That Dan Larimer has the autonomy and the freedom to build things like Eden and whatever other wonderful ideas that he comes up with. You know, he has his moments of, you know, channeling genius, and he just whips out some of the most extraordinary things our industry has seen, and really on the forefront of governance. You know, the fact that the ENF exists, the fact that that was created outside of Block.one, the fact that we have the first foundation of any one layer one chain that was organically grown from and out of the community and not birthed by its founders. You know, the fact that Block.one's role is now diminished and that they are just one star in a constellation of stars, which now has become a focus of bullish. And the fact that I don't have any ownership in FPAC, bullish, Block.one, the fact that I am, you know, completely unchained and free to do all the things that I've really wanted to do, but I had been constrained by those relationships. So I think the fact that we're all separate organizations, effectively being centers of gravity, focusing on our core competency and collectively forming this constellation is what has me most excited about our prospects. But the question, I guess, is how did we get here? And I think the short answer is, again, victim of its own success. Most people fail to recognize this, but Block.one did build and release the open source code that enabled all of this. And so that is a pretty significant contribution. They did attempt to build EOS VC to put capital into the hands of autonomous groups, giving them the authority to invest. One of the problems with that, and this is a matter of why it's so important that you align incentives, when you give money to a general partner, their money, the way they make a return is on the return on investment. They get a carried interest. And when you're a minority investor in projects, which, you know, over $1 billion has been deployed by Block.one, we often forget that. But the problem is when you're a VC, which I have been successfully, you know, I was co-founder of Blockchain Capital, the first venture capital fund in this industry. We funded the Coinbases, the Krakens, the BitGos, and the list goes on and on and on. Over 100 companies in the space. We're one of the most successful venture firms of all time. So I have a track record in venture, not just as a VC, but also as an entrepreneur, also as an advisor. I've worn many hats throughout my life on the forefront of innovation. But when you do that, you as a minority investor in a business, you can't force them, you know, as one investor in a deal, that they have to build on EOS. Every one of those groups, you know, made everyone, as a condition of their investment, agree to take a very serious look and agree that they may or were open to building on EOS. Unfortunately, many of those projects in the end did not. My understanding, and I didn't run any of these groups. Remember, I left Block.one shortly after EOS VC was launched to see how I could support the launching of the network, or the ABP. And then I've gone on to do a number of other things. And a lot of what I do in life is I'm not seeking credit. So you don't necessarily know all the things I do. You see the tip of the iceberg, but not everything else. But the problem you had there is, if the economic incentives had been different, I think we may have seen a different result, meaning the GPs should have received a really high carry, maybe 30, 40, 50% of the return on those investments for projects that had been built on EOS, and a 10% carry if they built on something else. That would have gotten the GPs that don't have the authority to make their portfolio companies build on EOS. But if they had been given a massive incentive, they would have hired extra people to do everything they possibly could have to support those projects' potential development there. And these are the benefits. It's very easy with the benefit of hindsight to say woulda, coulda, shoulda. This could have been done differently. This is how we live and we learn. But I'm at a point where I'm more excited about the prospects of EOS now than, other than at the beginning of this project. I'm super excited. Other things, obviously, because of how large the token sale was, Block.one became the center of the world when it came to regulatory action and investigation. And if you've never been regulated by the US authorities or investigated by them, it's hard to fully appreciate what that does to you and your organization. What it does is it instantly hands over the effective authority to the compliance and legal department. And in a world where, in an industry where being nimble and the ability to take risk is really paramount to being successful. And when everything, every action has to go through a compliance department, then eventually, because of how good a job Block.one did at being compliant, dotting every I, crossing every T, they were ultimately able to get this no action or waiver letter from the SEC, effectively deeming EOS not to be a security. That's something that I think the entire industry broadly, and even within the EOS community, we don't fully appreciate the value of that. 5 years from now, when we look back on all of this, that may have been the greatest thing that Block.one could have ever done for us. Because if EOS had been deemed a security, it's all game over. Look at what's going on with Ripple or XRP. And only Bitcoin, Ethereum, or EOS are in this situation. And the wheels of justice turn, but they turn slowly. It's my understanding that every layer one project is being investigated. And the question is, are they ultimately going to be deemed a collective investment scheme? Did their foundation or organization do anything with the intention of increasing the price of their token? If they did, it could be deemed a collective investment scheme, making the entire thing a security. And these things you don't come to this conclusion quickly. Remember, these things take years to play out. And because of the scale of Block.one's EOS token sale, the regulators came in and investigated that organization quickly. The way that regulators typically, or law enforcement act, is they gather as much evidence for as long as they possibly can. And when the time limit, the clock's about to run out, the statute of limitations are there, when you're down to the final minutes, that's when they hit you. They're like, we're not in any rush. We're the government. We move at whatever pace we want. And we're going to take all the time in the world to get as much evidence as possible so that when we come take action, we're going to get the results we want. And this is something that the market does not appreciate. But as someone that had to live through this and can understand the situation that Block.one was in, I have a lot of compassion for them. Do I think Block.one's execution of all the things that woulda, coulda, should have been done were great? No. Do I think there was bad intentions there? No. But I also understand the whole circumstances. I understand the entire community's sentiment right now. I'm upset. A lot of us are upset. And I think the main reason we're upset is not because of what Block.one did or didn't do. It's the performance of the overall ecosystem. Those of us that have spent years working on this, pouring our hearts and souls into this because we saw what we believed was a better technology, something that could ultimately deliver the long-term results of what we hope to see in the world. And then we're looking around and everybody else we know that's working on another project is winning, and we're just treading water. And that builds a tremendous amount of resentment. And when then we all get together and we start talking about this, it's very easy for, I'm angry, then I make you more angry, and then we make each other all more angry. And we also have to be very careful. Remember, Block.one isn't here to defend themselves, and it's very easy when you're having a one-sided conversation for everyone to turn against the organization that did ultimately create all this. And I'm not here to defend Block.one. I'm not here patting them on the back and saying, wow, they did an amazing job on everything. Clearly not. But look at all of us. Every day in life, I wake up and I say, thank you, God, for waking me up again and giving me another opportunity to serve. And I make mistakes, but every day I try to get better. And I don't think we're really here to judge the past. We're here to say, where are we right now? And where is it there? Where do we hope to go? And again, this constellation of different groups that ultimately are going to define their respective roles within the ecosystem have me incredibly excited.
Excellent. So I guess just to go back a little bit to B1, I know you speak very positively and you're very forward-looking, which I agree with. But you have previously described their actions as incompetent and with poor execution. And I just wondered, in what relation did they execute poorly, and in what way were they incompetent, in your opinion?
I'd like to correct my statement. Incompetent was not the fair thing. It's that was an overexpression of a feeling that I had. I'd say there was a lack of competence. Incompetent, I think, is a more extreme statement. So I'd like to revise that statement to there was some competency problems. But again, part of that the issue is when you are being investigated by the US regulators, do you think it's easy to hire great people? Think about having to recruit for an organization as you are being investigated, and you have class action lawsuits and you have all of these things. It is not easy to recruit and to retain talent. And so it's not entirely their fault either. And so, no, execution was lacking. I mean, I can talk to Voice. One of the, I think they didn't have the right team to ultimately deliver Voice, but I can also tell you they can't do anything without SEC approval. And the SEC never allowed them to launch a token. And so the biggest thing that no matter how well they had executed Voice, let's say they had the perfect team and the perfect product, the SEC wouldn't approve their token. And so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. And so there's a bunch of these things that they're not at liberty to talk about. And, I now that I'm, one of the things I'm happy about is the fact that I feel I'm free to do whatever I want now. Even the fact that I'm disclosing all of these facts probably is maybe something I maybe shouldn't have been doing, but that's part of why I'm so excited is I'm going to do what I think is right for the network. I hope to be fair to everyone. I don't like playing the blame and shame game. I don't think that gets us anywhere. As they say, you don't burn brighter by blowing out other people's candles, right? We're better together. And, I'm also super excited by the prospects of how do we bring the broader family together? How do we bring the whole band back together again? When we look at Theo, Telos, Ultra, Wax, Proton, et cetera, and how do we create a better working relationship? We don't want this sort of tribalism. We're all one family. And how do we learn from each other? And how do we ultimately produce better results as call it a family? And so I've had some really cool conversations with, call it the sister or sibling chains as well. They're really excited. I know a lot of these people, obviously. And so that's where I would say the competency issues lie. Didn't have all the right people. And also keep in mind some of the GPs that were managing capital for EOSVC have more of a trading background, which makes them good traders, but not necessarily a deep background in venture. And venture is a very, very hard business. And I'm not even sure it should have been done as venture. If I were redoing all of it, and what I wanted to do, and this is what you're going to see me do, I think at Helios, is I wanted to help set up, call it EOS incubators in major cities around the world where you had a concentration of blockchain people. So you get an office space, You create a cool space that's got sort of a co-working component in it where, people that were interested in building on EOS can come, have a place to hang out and work and connect with experts, where incubation can occur, some seed funding. This requires very small dollars, but what it does is it creates a hub in major cities, which should have been, maybe not the United States then, but it could be now. Your New Yorks, your San Franciscos, your Londons, your Seuls, your Berlins, you pick those cities. The cities I'm looking at right now, because it's now a few years later, I'm looking at Puerto Rico, I'm looking at Israel, and I'm looking at Seoul, South Korea as the first places to open up these incubators. And to the extent that you watch this video, and this is an area where, you have an interest in supporting Call It This mission, do feel free to reach out. But that was very small money, and it could have done a lot for the industry. We had these community events, we have these hackathons, and that was great that you've got these big events that, people travel from all over the world. But what you really need is the everyday. You don't need people to wait 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months to come to an event to meet people. It's more your call it your hubs for meetups, and then you have your meetup event every week. And how do you do that on a local level? That was one of the things I wanted to see. And in terms of the venture side, now, the market is different. I would have liked to have deployed EOS into all of those organizations that were funded, and where a return on investment was not even a focus. It really was more a model of grants, like what we're seeing with Pomelo. The things that I would have liked to have seen done effectively all exist today, in some regard. The EOS Network Foundation, I really view as like the Treasury Department of the EOS mainnet. It's there to give capital to the things that call it the bridges, the roads, the tunnels, call it the public good. I view the Eden operating system now effectively as the system of governance to elect our executive sort of officers. What I view Helios as is the investment arm to bring scale to those projects that are investable, as well as the things that I do. I do a lot of community, sort of I'm going to do everything through Helios that I'm good at that I don't see being done elsewhere. And that's also, remember, I funded a lot of the crypto ATM companies, a lot of the wallets, a lot of the exchanges. And so I want to go talk to all those crypto ATM companies and say, hey, you've got 100,000 units coming out in the market, add EOS for me. I've helped you the last 5 years. And to go talk to all my friends with wallets. Come on, let's get EOS integration. Let's get integration for EOS sister chains. These are it's hard to fully appreciate what goodwill, the value of goodwill that's created over the course of nearly a decade. The EOS community probably knows me for the things that I've done in EOS, but I've done a lot for a lot of chains. And that's actually one of the biggest risks that I've taken here. Forget the fact that I put a couple $100 million of effectively my wealth at risk to do what I'm about to do here. That tells you how confident I am, or what I think the prospects are. But it's also the social capital, right? That is something that most people don't fully appreciate what that is, but it's important. And reputation, as someone that has been chain agnostic throughout my time in this career, because I'm like, if anyone succeeds in making the world a better place, we all win. Keep on innovating. It's do what you feel is right and contribute in the ways that you think you can. One of the biggest challenges I've had in the industry was my association with EOS. And the fact that I'm going all in on EOS, obviously from a reputations perspective, and on a 7-year commitment. This is a very big bet that I think the community doesn't fully appreciate. This is going to close a lot of doors for me amongst a lot of friends and family and people that I work with. But there's also a social contract that I know that's being, brought up by some of the community. I don't think it is our responsibility as a community to enforce social contracts. That's a thing called karma and reputation. And then there are those people that continue to fulfill their social contracts. And those are the people that we put trust in, and I do have a social contract with this community. I did a lot to inspire people to get involved. And I fully appreciate and see the lack things, lack of performance, lack of things that have been fulfilled. And I'm stepping up to the plate to do my part. But I think it's a very slippery slope, and we have to be very careful. Social contracts are social contracts. They're just that. Legal contracts are something else. Legal contracts are enforceable. Social contracts are the things that create reputation. You don't get invited to dinner. you don't get these sorts of things. And you have to be very careful, where those distinctions lie, especially in an industry where everything is built around consensus and trust.
So why then do you think sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to ask, why do you think you owe the community a return on this social contract then? Do you think that's some sort of guilt because of B1's failure? Or just in your own words, why do you think you have that social contract in place?
Well, yes, I think that we have not delivered to the degree I thought we could. And yes, Block.one didn't do all of the things I would have liked to have seen, again, in a big part because of external factors outside of their control, but plenty of which that were, but easy to unpack things after the fact, with the benefit of hindsight. And also because I see opportunity. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't, see, the end goal and the end prize. The stars have aligned in such a way that I see a path to victory. I see a path to this actually working. I wouldn't go do this if I thought I'd just be wasting all my time and money to say, hey, everybody, I'm sorry, but here I am, let me help. It's the combination of the fact that I inspired a lot of people to get involved. Yeah. And things have not performed to the degree that they have. I did benefit from Block.one. And I also see a path to real success, not some pump, but something where through fundamental growth and performance and delivery that the network can truly succeed. And the combination of those things, I'm someone that I'm super tenacious. It's how I've been successful in life. I'm not a quitter, I'm not afraid of hard work. And things where there's, call it, a lot of risk. But these are the reasons I'm doing this.
So let me just ask you a short question really about your relationship with Brendan. Brendan Bloomer, the CEO of Block.one. So I just wanted to know, are you still friends? Are you still close today? What was your relationship when you were both younger? And do you feel maybe betrayed with the current state of affairs?
So Brendan was, we have to go back quite a while. Brendan has worked with me more than half of his life. So back in 1999, I recognized that virtual currencies and virtual goods, think crypto in its current form or NFTs in their current form, was going to be a big market. Just because something was intangible didn't make it less valuable. And the original market for this stuff was in video games. And so I started a business called IGE, which became the primary market maker in the world for in-game currencies. I built up a supply chain of about 300,000-400,000 people, primarily in China, that would play games like World of Warcraft and Second Life to mine digital currencies. I was by far the largest market maker in the world. I was PayPal's largest merchant for years. I was instrumental in the launching of Alipay. Brendan, when he was selling the in-game characters, and so I bought his business when he was 18 years old and moved him to Hong Kong instead of going to Stanford. And so Brendan, that's how Block.one ended up there. So Brendan and I have a very long-term relationship. He's worked with me for more than half his life, and so Brendan and I are always going to be friendly. We're always going to have a close relationship. He's like a brother. That doesn't mean that there's not moments where we're upset with each other or disappointed with each other and disagree with each other. But you really know the strength of a relationship when you've been through the good times, but most importantly, the bad. And do you come out the other side of it, finding resolution to issues when they arise? That's the nature of all good relationships. You don't know the quality of your relationship until you've been through, let's call it the shit. I don't like to, I tend not to like to use vulgar language, but it just, I feel like that, yeah, we've been through a lot of stuff and stuff that is, really complicated. And so Brendan and I are always going to have a relationship where I can pick up the phone anytime. I think, as a lot of the industry knows, Yves, Brendan, and I are having very active conversations to figure out a path forward that works for everyone, because that's what we ultimately need. If our goal is to build something that changes the world in a positive way, it's going to come from a place of peace and a place of unity. It's certainly not going to come from a place of the alternatives to those things.
So yeah, you touched on this. So why did you and Brendan then fly to Canada recently to meet with the EOS Network Foundation chief, Yves La Rose? And what can you tell us about that situation or negotiation?
Yeah, so these conversations are not new. Yves, Dan Larimer, Brendan, and myself have been having these conversations since before the launch of Eden. I've been working on this deal, everything we're talking about now, going back to that point. When you saw the network with a token go from 4 to 14, that was in the middle of all of those past negotiations as Eden was being launched. And those discussions and those negotiations failed. I kind of just threw up my hands and said, I'm working tirelessly to try and get this stuff all organized. And the goal was to launch an EOS Foundation and to have part of those vesting tokens go there, to launch Helios and to launch Eden. And the tokens were basically going to go to finance all the things that we have currently. And so the fact that these things have gotten done despite the last round of negotiations failing, I said, let me go back and try and do this again. And so this is not a new event. This is a conversation that's been going on for, since before Eden was launched. And so, this has just been an ongoing conversation. And at this point, one where I hope we're close to finding a path forward that works for everyone and allows everyone to show up as their best selves. I think, one of the biggest problems, and people don't fully appreciate the importance of the exchanges. The exchanges are the main points of distribution, the main points of what builds liquidity and customer acquisition. And whether you recognize it or not, most of the exchanges have not been super supportive of EOS or projects built on it.
Yeah.
And, in an ideal world, if we don't mess this up, we're going to have a massive exchange. I mean, I believe it launches today with the top 10 institutions in the industry. I believe it launches broadly next month in December, and having strong EOS trading pairs. Ultimately, if bullish as such a large Bitcoin holder and such large what hopefully is Bitcoin liquidity, I'd like to see EOS be the primary settlement layer for BTC and Tether. Obviously, I'm also one of the founders of Tether and invented this stable coin amongst other things. And so these are the sorts of things I do believe that are possible. And so hopefully we come to an agreement where bullish is able to do what it is able to do best for EOS as now what has become a highly regulated business. Block.one is never going to get out of at least, well, there's 2 years left on their agreement with the SEC where they can't do anything without SEC approval. So what Block.one is able to do is limited. And so I think what they're doing by becoming bullish is the highest and best use for how they're able to contribute in their current circumstances. So
let me.
I'm really excited. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Let me just ask you straight up. Do you believe then that the unvested tokens actually do belong to Block.one, or do you believe that the community has a claim to those tokens?
Well, I think that I understand the different perspectives. So let's just talk about, Block.one's position clearly is, it said that these are tokens, again, I've been involved in, obviously been around the creation of many different blockchains. Typically, when the group that are launching these networks get together, they're trying to put up to 90% of the tokens in their foundation. It's pretty standard that you'll see 30 or 40%. Block.one took one of the smallest allocations of any network in terms of precedent in the industry by far. They also said, we're not going to have those tokens be liquid. And this is before others did this. We're going to put them on a lockup schedule so we don't have access to them immediately. And I don't recall, having been there, anywhere where there was a statement where that the unlocking of these tokens has any requirement whatsoever. And so Block.one's position, I believe, is not incorrect. They took less than any other network that's been out there, despite what everybody wants to say. And those things have been unlocking. So I understand their position, and I don't think it's wrong. But I also understand the community's position, which I also appreciate and understand. The community's position is, we don't think that you've done enough. We would like those tokens back. We'd like to be able to reallocate and do something with those tokens. But as an ecosystem that is built entirely on consensus and trust, how is consensus being reached? Who decides? Because I talk to a lot of people and I see, a lot of people. The majority of the ones I see in my Twitter feed and in the channels I'm on, a majority of them don't seem to share the view that taking away what people believe to be someone else's property is ultimately good for inspiring trust in this network that is already in a pretty fragile state. What I see is obviously a sentiment of a lot of people that are disappointed, more because of token price than probably anything Block.one did or didn't do, but people are frustrated, and Block.one is becoming really the scapegoat, the channeling of all that, call it frustration, some of it legitimate, some of it perhaps not fair. And the question is, how do we achieve consensus around this? Because if all of a sudden you can just say, oh, we're going to fork EOS to cut off your vesting, what prevents us then as a community, without even a due process, to then say, well, we don't like you and we're going to take all your tokens away and somebody else's? The slippery slope of what is the process by which consensus is reached? What is the judicial or process for how do these decisions get made? Blockchains are largely about consensus and trust. I don't think I've seen a sufficient amount of consensus reached. I see a lot of different opinions and a lot of people that actually don't have a firm opinion. I see what appears to be a minority of people that are just really angry right now. And they're like, burn Block.one to the ground. But because you have a small vocal percentage of the community that want to take a very, very harsh action, many of whom probably don't even hold any EOS at this point, is that the thing that we should be listening to and acting? And I appreciate all the arguments. I'm not taking a position one way or another. I have no interest in B1 bullish or FPAC at all. Nothing.
Can I just interrupt you there? Sorry to interrupt you. But you are, I would suggest, taking a position by doing a deal with Block.one to secure, I think it's 45 million of the EOS, and a large proportion of that will be unvested. So aren't you in fact actually, legitimizing their ownership by doing that deal? And was that the best way to approach that particular deal? I mean, it's a tough question, but I think that's the question that a lot of people in the community would like to know the answer to.
Well, please provide me another approach. What would be the other way to do that? So my primary limitation, the thing that has prevented me from doing what I'm doing now, even having this conversation, was my relationship as a shareholder. So the main thing that has prevented me from doing everything I wanted to do for, call it EOS, was that limitation. So for one, that relationship had to change. So how do you go about making that change to the relationship? Then what is the other route to actually getting into this space in a meaningful way to do the things that I want to do? How do I get, and by the way, I own quite a bit of EOS outside of this transaction. How do I get to a point where I have this large a pool of tokens to be able to do the things that I want to do to support the network's growth in a rapid way? How do I do that? How do I start launching, call it ETF-like products? How do I start creating financial institutional type products? There's only one way to do that. And you have to have a very large block of tokens. which was I meant to go talk to the block producers and ENF and say, hey guys, let's go create a bunch of inflation to pay me? I mean, what are the alternatives? I certainly didn't see another alternative. I saw an opportunity to be able to step up to the plate and do a very big thing on behalf of the industry. And if there was a better way to do this, please forgive me. I didn't see another path to getting into this position to be able to do all that I'm able to do. And also the last time I got involved about when we were before Eden and the ENF, one of the problems I had is I was actually having conversations with a lot of people, which is why the token price started to spike around those conversations. And one of the things that I realized, having now done this again, I had to do it quietly this time. The fact that I was being so open and transparent with everyone is the reason the deal fell apart. And so I learned my lesson from the last go around, which is, unfortunately, I can't broadcast and telegraph everything I'm attempting to do here. This time I actually have to smartly do it like a normal business person, figure it out, get a deal done, and then share all of it. And so I did try this once in a very collaborative way where Dan Larimer, Yves, and many others had a seat at the table as we discussed how to go about doing this. And it didn't work out that time.
Sure. So, I mean, one thing I really like about you is that you always speak about accountability and transparency. And I agree, I think that's really important. So obviously, if you can't answer this question for legal reasons, that's fine. But I just wondered, with the Telos agreement, I believe it was Telos, I think they bought about just under 2% of the total token supply, and they paid a 10-cent premium on each token. So I just wondered, I know you exchanged all of your shares, B1 and Bullish, and all access to all the Bitcoin and everything else for the agreement for B1 to transfer 45 million EOS. I just wanted to know, what was the value of that deal? Did you pay a premium, or did you get a discount on the value of EOS, based on today's market price broadly?
Well, I mean, you also have to look at the fact that it's got a 7-year vesting schedule on it. I paid a substantial premium if you look at net present capital. I didn't get a substantial discount. I did not get a substantial discount. I did get a discount, but that's assuming they're all liquid. Net present capital, I paid a premium, and probably a substantial premium, but that's a matter of how you look at the net present value of money. And in the crypto space, that's a multiplier. So I probably paid a very large premium, but that's a matter of how you measure. So that's my view. Someone could make a different argument if they wanted, but I paid, depending upon how you value things, something that's not far from the $200 million of face value.
Wow. Okay. So given that B1 are going to stop supporting the development and maintenance of EOSIO or EOS blockchain technology, do you think that they then owe a duty of care via perhaps a one-off payment to the EOS community, maybe via Helios or ENF or Pomelo, as a way of kind of advocating that responsibility?
Yeah, so I don't think that they are stopping. I mean, if you look at the prospectus for Bullish, they continue to talk about how they're going to support us. They do continue to do things to support us, just not to the degree that we want. It's not like they've disappeared and stopped. I think that expectations are a tricky thing, right? But I don't think that Block.one is going to stop supporting us. Clearly, the aggressive tone or nature of the conversation we're having is not encouraging. It doesn't make Block.one more excited to help. If anything, we are making it harder on ourselves. I mean, I would predict that Block.one is going to do things to support the ENF, that Block.one is going to do things to support Eden, that Block.one is going to do things to support Pomelo, that Block.one is going to do things to support core development, that Block.one is going to do things to drive further liquidity. I believe that all of those things are going to happen. I probably can't say much more because we are in the midst of those conversations. But I mean, I think we all know what everybody would like to see, and it's just a matter of coming to an agreement where everybody is satisfied. And those conversations are happening on a pretty constant basis. I saw Brendan for breakfast yesterday. I spoke at length with Yves yesterday. I mean, this is all in process. Now, the only person who I think is getting a really raw deal right now is actually me in retrospect. I think I did a really bad. I think I did a really bad deal. But
you did something
it is what it is.
Selflessly, Brock. A selfless deal, perhaps. Maybe you're paying dues on your social contract.
Hey, it's all good. I'm not. I'm just kind of looking at everything and going, "Wow, why did I do this?" It's all good. It's all good. I'm excited. And by the way, I don't mind. Difficult. I'm not someone that I don't measure my success in life by what I have. Right. I measure my success in life by what I've done and the impact it's had on the world around me. And I am so bullish on our potential prospects right now that if I didn't do what I'm doing, 10 years from now, if things didn't work out for EOS, I would always be like, I saw the window of opportunity. I saw the opportunity to shoot that arrow through the eye of a needle, and I didn't take the shot. I'm more that sort of person. I see the possibility right now. And if you don't take the shot, you'll never know. You can't hit anything if you don't take the shot, and so here we go. We'll see how this all unfolds.
It kind of feels a little bit like there's clowns to the left of you, jokers to the right, and you're just frustrated, stuck in the middle.
It definitely feels like that.
Okay, so let's move on to Helios now, the big news. So in your own words, tell us, what is Helios? What inspired you to launch it? And when can we start seeing some action?
Yeah, so the team is assembling. And again, for anyone that's interested in getting involved, reach out. We can add those people that actually want to help, right? We're not looking for a bunch of lurkers in our private, sort of channels, but we are about inclusion. And we are looking for those people that have experience and have something to offer to get into that group. The big reveal is going to be on December 7th, which is where we kind of unveil all of, what it is that we're intending to do. I think we've already alluded to a lot of those things. And again, come down to Puerto Rico. We have Puerto Rico Blockchain Week, December 6th to the 12th. There's going to be at least one big day of EOS sort of family related stuff. A lot of us haven't gotten together in person for a long time. And so I invite you all down here. Hope to see you. And this is an invitation not just to EOS, but all of the sister chains, the entire EOS family. Let's bring that band back together again. And I've got some really fun stuff in terms of surprise, nothing that affects our industry, stuff that I know how to do from an entertainment perspective. Let's just say, chestahedrons in the heavens. If you saw what we did in El Salvador with Bitcoin, just fun stuff that if you haven't seen it before, it is mind-blowing, has nothing to do with the underlying network. This was more the party side of things. Just, I don't want to mislead anyone. And also more importantly, I think the EOS community is sick of like, oh, there's something big coming. So I just want to get it out there. This is for entertainment. There's not a big surprise coming in terms of some big thing that we're going to do for EOS. I don't want to mismanage expectations. But in terms of all the things we're going to do, and I think we've level set. If the ENF is the Treasury Department, if Eden is what's looking like the governance election process for executive offices, we're the investment arm. I'm looking to finance community development because it's just something I'm good at. I'm hosting an event normally at least once per day, often multiple events per day around the world. The venture sort of arm, the investment arm, as people that actually have investment experience and in this area, which is not something you just develop overnight. But and oh, by the way, just from that perspective, really, really interested in gaming and NFTs in terms of the NFT market on the EOS mainnet, the gaming, market. And again, for anyone listening, if that's something that calls to you, and especially on the NFT side, I really want to see what we can get done in the context of EOS and NFTs prior to Art Basel in Miami. And so if this is an area where you think that there's something we can discuss, try to reach out immediately, because we're like 10 days away from the biggest art event in the Western Hemisphere occurring. I'm speaking at a bunch of the events, connected to all the events, and I can take members of the EOS community that have interesting things underway and get you into an elevated place to be a platform from which to speak. I can also connect you with a lot of interesting stuff, and it'll be another year before we find ourselves there, and I don't want any missed opportunities. But then there's also financial products, right? Institutional financial products. I sit on the boards of multiple public, companies, and and in terms of capital raising, I've raised a lot of money for a lot of things in my life, and so that's the areas in which I think I'm uniquely qualified, to assist. Call it community development. And a lot of integration, call it corporate development, business development, going out there and talking to the various constituents in terms of the bridges, the roads, and the tunnels that exist for Bitcoin and Ethereum. And how do we make sure that EOS is integrated into all of that infrastructure? Back to like crypto ATMs, credit cards, wallets, exchanges. I have those relationships, and I think that I can do a good job of selling us into those channels. Those things that's not, Helios is really the investment arm. Though, because we're going to have a bunch of people, there are other things that I intend to do, because I see an opportunity that I'm well qualified to. You don't make any money off of that. That's just how do we contribute as a very large EOS token holder, one of, if not the largest.
So are you going to be investing in exchange for equity? Are you going to be doing grants, kind of like ENF and Pomelo, or are you going to do a bit of everything, really? Maybe support Pomelo, support ENF, and also look to invest in equity, return, EOS-based organizations and corporations?
We'll probably do everything, though. I think where I think the thing that we're uniquely qualified to do is really the investment side of things, which could be equity, could be tokens, right? It's the things I wanted to see done at the EOS VC level that didn't get done because I wasn't there. There's a lot of things I would have done very differently. We've talked about some of it here today, but I wasn't there to lead.
So are you going to be hands-on then?
Didn't happen that way.
So, sorry to interrupt you, Brock. Are you going to be then quite a hands-on leader for for Helios, and really drive through your quite obviously clear and positive vision for it to ensure that the ethos and the modus operandi, if you like, of the organization has your values instilled throughout the whole team?
Absolutely, I'm going to be at the captain of the ship until such time as I end up unless, of course, I end up in an elected office that prevents me from playing that role.
Okay, well, that easily moves to our next question. What's your plans for the future of politics then? Obviously, you ran as US president in the last election, but you failed to submit some paperwork for some states, I believe. So you didn't really have a chance of winning. Not that an independent does have a chance of winning in the current system, but I just wondered, two questions really. Are you going to run for Congress or Senate in the future? And how can independent politicians play a bigger role in democracies like the US and Britain today?
Well, my run for president last year clearly was not about winning. I announced my run on July 4th, an auspicious day for an independent candidate of election year. It's an impossibility to win from that point. Most of the ballot submission dates had already lapsed. Though I did get on 16 or 17 ballots, I broke every ballot record in the time that we were operating. And during COVID, where collecting signatures is nearly an impossibility. For me, this was a matter of a trial run to understand the mechanics of the system. I had to go, under the hood to understand the process, because it'd be a long conversation to explain all of how it works and why I think it's needed. But from my perspective, our government our system of governance has a very important role to play in our lives. And I'm very concerned about the decisions being made right now. And so, like if you see a child in the road and a bus coming, what do you do? Unfortunately, I know too much. I'm too connected. I have the things that make me able to do this. And then the only question is, am I willing? I don't want to do this. Politics was not on my list of personal desires in life. I didn't want to do this. I didn't desire to do this. I will it because I'm willing and able and believe there's a moral obligation to act when you see an opportunity to make a difference. And I spend a lot of time with heads of state. I spend a lot of time with our elected officials and civil servants. And I think that we need proper representation of, people that understand not just what's going on in the present, but understand where we're going, right? As I like to say, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a capitalist, I'm a futurist. Of course, I understand the importance of economic issues and understand the importance of social issues, and too much our country in the US, we're divided on those bases when the reality is it's a Venn diagram. You have to have your economic house in order before you can put a mask on someone else. But clearly, once you've got your house in order, try to put that oxygen mask on the person sitting next to you if you're able. And so how do we get to that brighter, better future? And the world is changing so rapidly that we need people with actual vision. Where are we going and how do we get there? And clearly, I would not subject myself to all of what one goes through by running for president. Remember, by running for president, you are stepping into the ultimate ring of fire. You're asking to have your life investigated, by every agency,
every journalist,
so yeah, by everything, where it can cost you your life, your liberty, your reputation, all that you have. There's a reason why almost no one is willing to do this. Because the risks, the stakes are so high, but I made it through the first phase. I clearly wouldn't have done that if I didn't have longer term plans, which I'm not at liberty to disclose right now. But I think if you stay tuned and not much longer, I think you'll figure out what I'm doing next in the weeks to come.
So we look forward to your Senate run then of 2022, hypothetically. So just, I like the way you said you did the first phase, which was running for president. It's not usually how most people get into politics, first of all, but that's the unique Brock way. So I've worked in politics for the last sort of 10 years, and I've recently left politics. And I left politics to redefine media because I felt that it was impossible for us to run campaigns based on truth, trust, and accountability because the media, social media, whatever, it was so easily gamed. It's been gamed for so long. So I lack hope of political change. And the thing that frustrated me the most was how slow progress is. Being an entrepreneur, I'm sure you're familiar, we want to move fast and break things often. So I just wondered, how do you have the patience for politics? And do you really believe that you can make any change?
Yes, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think I could make an impact. And this is far bigger than me. As one individual, I can actually do quite a bit, but only so much. But if you can create a movement, if you can inspire, remember, we only have the power to change ourselves. But by being our best selves, we have the ability to inspire others. And so by doing this, by being a maverick, by proving potentially what's possible, I might be able to inspire a whole lot of others. And in that process, this is how change happens. Is it going to happen overnight? No. This is obviously something that is going to take many years, but not many decades. We don't have many decades. We don't. And a lot of people are, call it awakening to this reality. And the future is going to happen to you or with you. So get involved and let's co-create a future that works for all of us. And, the biggest thing for Americans is vote. Get out there and vote. Use it. If you don't vote, you're going to get whatever they decide to give you. And, take the time to get informed and probably stop voting for parties and start voting for people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to blame again anyone, but the parties are the problem more than anything else. It's don't hate the player, hate the game. It's a systems design problem. How do we upgrade that system from the media, to how we choose our elected officials, how we allow external influence or the potential for regulatory capture and crony capitalism, and how do we fundraise? How do we create transparency around that? What are our legislators' special sort of interests that they answer to? These are the things that, blockchain is doing. What is it at its core that we're doing here? We're bringing accountability to a world that is lacking. We're bringing transparency to a world of opacity, right? And we're democratizing access to tools or utility as well as opportunity so that everyone has equal access to those things, subject to having a phone and connectivity. But these are just part of the things that what we're doing and what it's really all about. I know a lot of times people are focused on the token prices and things of that nature, but what we're doing here is really transforming the world. There is a digital transformation occurring, and it is changing the world rapidly, faster than regulators and legislators or government can even keep up. It's moving at a very fast pace that's accelerating, but it's also very important that the public and the private sectors, including our own, are in communication in some way, or we'll see the things that are happening. The U.S. infrastructure bill that just got put through had some very harmful language, in an infrastructure bill that affected our industry. And it's called, if you do not have someone representing you at the table, this is what's going to continue to happen. They're going to push through legislation that is harmful to us, which is why, I wish, I don't want this. If there's somebody better and able and more qualified to do this, please, happy to trade seats with you. Happy to, if there's someone out there that wants to do this and you think you're better qualified, please, by no means, I do not. I am more than happy to trade spots.
So do you think then, really, the kind of the root of all evil to this has been the over-centralization of capital? So if you look back to the financial crisis in the 20s and 30s, the Great Depression, after that crash, there were, consequences to those bankers. Some went to prison. There was new regulations put in place. Main Street Wall Street couldn't gamble with Main Street, and so forth. So I just wonder, in 2008, when a similar crash happened, it was bailed out, $7 trillion printed, and the bankers effectively were given that money. So 85% of that money went to the big corporations and the banks. So wouldn't you agree that we seem to have socialism for the super wealthy and the elites, and then a weird broken capitalist system for the rest of us? So the ultimate question is capitalism broken?
Yes, but I also don't think it's raw capitalism, and I don't think that any of these ideologies are the future. We've tested them all. Capitalism is the best system we've seen, but it's still lacking. I refer to myself as a conscious capitalist, or a compassionate capitalist. It's back to personal responsibility, personal incentive, but then understanding the social contract of how do we form and build healthy communities. And so absolutely major problem. And I also don't think that those that built these systems actually did it with, call it, bad intentions. I believe at the time they thought they were doing the right thing for civilization, and they were just off a little bit. But it's kind of like if you fire an arrow or a bullet and you're off by a very little bit, but over a very long time, if it's going for miles, tens of miles, hundreds of miles, eventually you are far, far, far from what was your intended target, which is why we have to stop, reassess, and course correct. The problem is we've never had any course correction. We've just kind of continued on the same road, and now over a very long period of time, we're far from where we were intended to be. And the fact that, that what happened in the financial crisis did not result in anyone going to jail is back to my point, a lack of accountability. If you have no accountability in a system, you're destined to fail, destined. A system that's devoid of accountability is always going to fail. And that's what's happened. And yes, it's not real capitalism. We've got, crony capitalism. There's regulatory capture. There's special interests that, are making sure that, yes, socially they're continually bailed out. They're continuing to get all of these sort of government handouts, those that actually need them the least. Because when they make a mistake, they're not willing to pay the consequences, which is failure.
Exactly. That's the biggest point. So I think this has created, there's more wealth in the hands of the 1% in the US, in the UK and France, as it was, in the 17th and 18th century in regards to France and England. And that creates a plutocracy, effectively, or a ruling class, a bourgeoisie. So how do you think inflation, quantitative easing, printing money, and I guess globalization is decimating the middle class, in particular in America? It's happening here in Europe as well, but slightly slower. And I just wondered, what are the consequences for society when the super rich have all the wealth and the poorest and the middle class are only just slightly above the very poorest? What effect does that have on society?
Well, I mean, this is, again, the reason that I'm doing the things that I'm doing in the world. I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about our collective future, and we're about to see it. We printed over 20, not just the US, but over $23 trillion was printed during COVID. Those numbers are probably like quite a bit higher than that now. That's actually not even current data. We're seeing inflation of what they say is 6% in products. So if you live in the colder parts of the United States, this time of year, you go out and buy salt, to be able to salt your driveway. It melts the ice and things. But you go get your bags of salt. Your bags of salt last year and the years before were $6 a bag. A week or two ago, it was $16 a bag. The current price is $22. Meaning the price of basic things like salt are up 3 to 4x. Meaning we're looking at crazy inflation. Everything, you're going to look at your costs of water, milk, meat, cheese. I mean, we're about to find out, what happens. And what does that mean for every American that, is dependent upon Social Security? There's questions of whether or not there's enough money there to make these Social Security payments long-term. But even if they do, the value of the check that you receive is going to be worth not enough to cover the basic minimum needs you have. Let's say that you signed up for an employment program that involved the pension. Most of those pensions are underfunded, but let's assume they were fully funded. It doesn't matter. Your pension payout is not enough to survive. The inflationary period that we're entering, and you talk about the Great Depression, I hope it's not worse than that, but it very well could be. I'm a hope for the best, plan for the worst type of person, but we are entering into a very, very scary period. Gas prices in the US are, at $5 and they're going up from there. It's by the way, that's the big problem that we have, is that we often talk about race issues, but it's really a class issue. We have a major class issue that exists in this country. It's a class issue more than anything else. And obviously that you see that in race, but this class issue, the economic divide is a very real issue, and how do we answer for it? My guess is that, something, I don't like the term universal basic income. I did prefer things like a freedom dividend or universal basic sustenance. How do we make sure that people's most basic needs are met, so that people have a roof over their head, they at least have food available to them, right? And access to some form of healthcare. If you don't do that, remember when people are starving, when their back is pushed up against the wall and they feel they have no alternative left, this is when morals become secondary to survival. this is when things get very, very dangerous. This is when you do get a French Revolutionary event. And how is it that we're going to make sure that basic needs are met? And it probably does come in the form of this. And we did just test this. All these stimulus checks that had been given out throughout the United States is effectively an experiment with UBI. The problem is we restricted people's ability to work. So at the same time that we were implementing a universal basic type of income system, we also de-incentivized and demotivated everyone from working. And so not a very not a good,
the data's not very reliable.
The data's not reliable because it wasn't the right system. But that's probably where we're going. And I don't think there's a choice. If you don't find a way to take care of people's most basic needs, and that survival is kicking in for tens of millions of Americans, it creates a very scary environment where very bad things could happen. And that's I don't have the answer. I can't tell you here's the right answer, but this is a conversation we need to be having because the issue is very real and it's one that no one wants to talk about. The media doesn't like to talk about these things. Our government doesn't like to talk about these things because we have a tendency of kicking the can down the road. But you can only do that for so long. Eventually, you have to address issues.
I think the media not talking about it is a symptom of over-centralization of capital because the rich, the super rich and the wealthy are allowed to purchase media outlets and they're able to game their output. Therefore, they're able to change the opinions of the masses. And then they're able to lobby governments and that further denigrates democracy. So when you have this continuingly larger centralization of wealth, it creates a very dangerous situation, as you alluded to. The elite class is probably the same size as it was in around 1940. And the conditions are not too dissimilar from the 30s. And you've got the elites who have a lot of power and they're using this to drive xenophobia, to drive divisions, and frankly, to drive nationalism. And those ingredients typically lead to wars. So when you say something very bad could happen with the military industrial complex, with the notion that China is testing all the weapons in the world, are you fearful then that that's where society is headed next? And that could be due to capital.
Yeah, these are all of what you said are real concerns. Again, why else would I be getting involved in politics? If I didn't share or understand those risks, I wouldn't be doing this. Again, as I said, it's a moral obligation. This one's for all the marbles, as you said, globalization. We're all kind of in this together right now. What affects one of us affects all of us. But let this not be the end of the conversation. Let's
Brock, are you going to sit down
again?
Shall we sit down in Puerto Rico then on December the 7th and carry on this conversation in the face-to-face?
Deal. And I think we'll have a lot of interesting things to talk about by then. So let's plan on that.
That sounds great. Brock, thank you so much for your time. You've been so kind and generous with it. It's been a fantastic conversation. And I look forward to seeing you in person in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.